tents that we walked through to get the needles smelled like a hospital, which was pretty bad too. And otherwise...
And that's when World War II started, the last year of high school. You had to deliver telegrams to missing in action families and death notices.
Yeah,
Why would you have to deliver a death notice and not the actual Marines or soldiers come to the house?
I don't know. They didn't. The military sent telegrams to the families, and 2 stars on the envelope would say that they were missing in action, and 1 star was that they were dead. It was pretty heartrending to...
You were just a kid.
Yeah, to deliver these telegrams.
You would ask for the father or the mother, or?
I asked for the addressee on the telegram.
Oh, right.
And
would they have to sign?
yes, they would have to sign for it, and some of them would start crying because they knew, they guessed pretty much what it might have told them.
And what would you do? You must have been
I said, I'm sorry, and then I would leave, It was heartrending, yeah.
Right. And those were your neighbors, some of them?
No.
No?
No, I didn't know any of them.
Okay. This was in Newark, though, right?
Newark, Hillside, Kearney, Harrison, all around.
You rode your bike everywhere?
Yeah. I used to put on maybe 30 miles a night on the bike.
Okay. All right. When you mentioned the British sailors, I wasn't sure if the war had started yet, because we were helping.
The war was going on. It started in December the 7th, 1941. I graduated in 1942.
Oh, okay.
So the war was already on. And,
right.
And I couldn't understand why, when the British sailors were bussed in, the workers didn't greet them very well. They tried to be friendly. They waved from the bus, and the workers would go back to England or something like that. They didn't like it, the British.
I think it may have to do with President Roosevelt was helping the British before the war, and there was that isolationist feeling.
The war was not at all popular until Pearl Harbor. I mean, nobody wanted to go. He couldn't institute a draft, and people, I think they would have objected strong, just like today. You try to instill a draft, it wouldn't be very popular at all.
That's interesting you say that. I wanted to ask you, how did the bombing of Pearl Harbor change your family's life?
Well, after Pearl Harbor, my 2 brothers went into the service fairly soon. They were drafted. And I was deferred because I was working in a shipyard. Well, first I was going to school. I wasn't old enough yet. And then after I graduated, I was deferred because the draft board kept calling me every month and wanted to know what I did, and I told them. So finally, when I decided I wanted to go in to the service, I asked, what do I have to do?
You were called every month even though you worked in the shipyard?
Yes. And they kept asking me the same questions, and I gave them the same answers, and it resulted that I was deferred. So finally I said, what do I have to do to get in? So they told me, well, get permission from your foreman, and then you can leave. So I did, and...
Were you the last brother?
Yes.
How did your parents...
My mother said that first the house was full of her sons and my sister, and then next thing you know, only my sister was left.
Okay, so you worked overtime 7 days a week?
Yeah, I did. In fact, the funny thing about that, when I worked for the shipyard, I went back and visited the Postal Telegraph office one time, and the manager of the office asked me what I was doing, and I told him. And then he said, well, how much you making? I said, well, my base pay is $37 a week. He says, gee, I'm only making 33, and he was the manager of the telegraph office. That was a surprise. But actually, I was making a lot more than that. I was making like 40, 50 because of the overtime, double time, and I think even sometimes triple time on holidays, I don't know.
What did you do with all that money?
I gave it to, I put it, my parents, they just bought a 3-family house, and I wanted to make sure that they didn't lose any of that. Because we struggled through the Depression, you know. My father was a real estate broker, and that didn't do too well during the Depression. So I gave most of it to them.
So they rented out their house to 2 other families?
They lived in one floor and rented out to them.
So you said that you decided there's more to this world than the inside of a ship's hull, and you asked the draft board, how do you get drafted?
Yeah, I tell you that. I asked them.
And you got your draft number moved up?
Right. I'm listed as a enlisted, not drafted.
Oh, important.
In other words, what happened was I got in the wrong line when I went to be inducted, and I found myself in the Army line. I says, no, I wanted to be in the Marines, so they had me listed as drafted into the Army, discharged, and enlisted in the Marines. That's how my papers say.
And what are the dates? Like,
the date would be 1942.
So they had it all on one date? That you were...
Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. It was 43 that I enlisted, right. April, in fact, I was in the Marines April 6th, I think.
Okay.
It says on there when I started.
You were 18?
I was 18 years old, and I picked the Marine Corps because I didn't relish living in a foxhole in Europe in the wintertime, and I preferred the climate that the Marine Corps was operating in.
How did you know what was happening in Europe? It was in the you didn't have TV?
In Europe?
Yeah, like what you just said, that you knew
I knew that the Army operated in Europe where you have summers and winters, and I knew that the Marines were operating in the Pacific where it was pretty much summer the year round.
You preferred summer to winter?
Prefer summer.
Okay. Okay, so now you're in Paris Island, 2 months?
For 2 months, it was a hurry-up course that they gave you because it's a lot more. I believe the course is much harder now than it was then.
Oh.
Because they have that last week or two where they have to go through a very vigorous exercise. We didn't have to do that.
I didn't know that you were used to taking 2 buses to get to work at 7:30.
You know, I had to take one to downtown Newark and then one to Port Newark after that. The hours that I had to work was 7:30 and often to 9 o'clock at night, and therefore the getting up early in the Marine Corps was no problem.
Wow. Talk about the old men's platoon.
The old men. They had a special, we had platoons where we joined up and we trained with that particular platoon. Then they had men that were older in a separate platoon, I guess maybe for less strenuous or something like that. And being that we were 18, we referred to them as old men, the old men platoon. Mm-hmm. The old men was on the average age of maybe 35.
Mm-hmm. And what did it mean that you had to service?
That I had to what?
Service.
Oh, every platoon goes through 1 week of mess duty.
Oh, okay.
So that in the field, if it's necessary, they can pull you to help feed the rest of the troops. So we had to be used to handling food But the 1 week training that they give you for that was a horrendous thing. That was one of the hard parts of being in the Marine. Yes, that was one of the hardest parts because
Peeling
we
potatoes?
had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, man.
And we had to work till 10 o'clock at night. And this is for 1 week. And if they found that one of the utensils or the pots had a little bit of dirt on it, we had to do all of them all over again.
And then you went to home, and then you went to Camp Lejeune?
Camp Lejeune was first, it was indicated in the boot camp that I would be going to radar school. So when I got to Camp Lejeune, first I had to take a radio operator's course because they were still setting up the radar school. Then we went out, after I got through to what they call a 12-word table, which is pretty fast, Morse code. Had to learn Morse code. Then they started the school, and we, again, that was a pretty hectic course too, because again, we didn't get much sleep, and they try to cram as much as possible in the shortest space of time. It turns out, I found out that my calling at that time was electronics. I found it came easy to me, so I finally figured out what it is I should do and I could do. But anyway, I took the course, and after the course was done, we had to disassemble a portable radar set. It had a small engine generator, gasoline engine generator to power it, and we had to load it into these, what they call telephone carts, which are carts designed to carry sealed carts from ship to shore, in other words, from landing boats to the beach, so parts don't get wet, so they're sealed. So we put the parts of the radar set into that, and then we got on a landing boat down in North Carolina. It was December, and we went out to the ocean there, and then made a landing. The front went down, and we dragged the carts up the beach, and there were 12 operators and 2 technicians assigned to the radar set, and I was one of 2 technicians. And
you were a corporal?
I was a corporal. I became a corporal afterwards when the course ended. Right afterwards, they said, don't bother sewing on your PFC stripe because you're going to get corporal stripes right afterwards. So, but anyway, we set the radar set up, and as one of the technicians, I made sure that it was good operation, and it worked.
Did you have to swim, or were you in deep water from the barge?
Actually, I didn't really learn to swim until we went to Hawaii.
So how did you get the cart up the beach?
We waded in water up to our waist because the landing barge is designed to go up as far up the beaches so that your water that you wade in is not much higher than that, supposedly. So the front of the barge would drop down, and you would go off and step into the water and then up on a beach. Now, it was December, but it was surprisingly warm. The water was warm. It wasn't cold.
Had you ever been in the ocean before?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
But not swimming, no.
So you got the highest marks in the class?
Yeah, they told me that I was at the top of the class. I don't know what the mark was. They never told me what it was.
Oh, and like you said earlier, electronics came easy for you, but that's what you realized you should do after you got out.
I figured when I do get out, if I do get out, that's what I want to do.
That's awesome. And tell me about Christmas 43.
Yeah, it was a couple of days before Christmas. I helped decorate the Christmas tree in the mess hall, but I didn't get to see Christmas there. 2 days before, we took a train to take us to the West Coast, and we spent Christmas Day on the train. It took a week for the train to get there.
How was that trip?
It was okay. It was, got to see the United States, the whole length of the train track anyway.
That's good.
At least what the trains see.
And how was it seeing the civilians while you were in uniform? You were proud?
They were very appreciative, I think, of the fact that we were in the service. And
all right, so now you and your classmates are assigned to the signal company of the 7th Field Depot.
Right, we landed in Linda Vista, California, which is a waypoint where you get outfitted, you get assigned. We were assigned to the signal company of the 7th Field Depot, which was a new idea that the Marines had of having supplies and repair facilities up close with the frontline troops. And the depot consisted of about 6 companies, motor transport, engineering, who made roads, stuff like that, and other, which I don't remember. We got on we were assigned to this company. We were issued, I trained on an M1 rifle, but they gave me a carbine after I got out there, after training on the M1, which is a smaller weapon. And they gave us backpacks and mess kits and stuff like that, and canteens. And then we were there about a week, received shots, and always getting shots, even why. We, after a week, we went on an escort carrier. It's a small aircraft carrier, and it took us to Hawaii. I think it took about 9 days, Oahu, the island of Oahu, and there we were in a tent camp. It was good duty. We had 1 day on, 1 day off, and we were there about 2 months, and then for some reason we had to go to Kauai for a month, which is a nearby island, about 90 miles. Got deathly sick because it was an empty freighter that we went on, and the waves were pretty high. But got there the next morning, and I was, one weekend I was walking around, and this convoy of trucks was going by with people and men on it, and I said, "Where are you headed?" And they said, "Hop aboard, it'll be worth your while," so I did. And it turned out to be a tour of the Kauai given by a plantation owner. And when we got to the end of one end of the tour, halfway, he had pineapples and stuff on the trailer there for us.
That's nice.
It was very nice. He described all the different spiritualistic parts of the land formation. Evidently, the natives originally worshipped the land formation. They had names for them, and it was kind of weird, but that was their religion.
Right. Getting back to, you said the 7th Field Depot was a new idea, whereby supply and maintenance facilities will be brought in as close to the fighting as possible without needing outside support, starting on D-Day.
Well, in the past, they used to have the maintenance and supply in the distance, in the back. They made it an independent outfit.
And all in the company were techs of one sort or another in communications.
Right, in the signal company. The policy was not to expose us to direct enemy fire, so we lost very few men.
Oh, that's good.
In all the companies, they lost very few in the depot. Maybe half a dozen, if that many.
Were any of them your friends? Or?
No.
Oh, okay. So getting back to the island, there was a 6 o'clock curfew?
Yeah, because the sailors and the Marines and the soldiers would be there, and after 6 o'clock, evidently, a lot of fights used to start. They got drunk, you know, and so they decided it was best to have a curfew at 6.
Oh, wow. You saw a lot of hula dances?
Yeah, they were all over the place. They did their best to, you know, make things very pleasant for us.
It's nice.
And
I bet you look back on that time with a lot of good memories.
yeah, it was good duty, just like later on China turned out to be.
Oh, good. And then you were transferred back to Oahu to board a troop ship, which was going to be in the convoy.
Yeah, that took 35 days to make the trip. We did a lot of reading, playing cards and hearts.
And that was in mid-May, 44.
Yeah. And we saw sharks in the water. We saw flying fish, which were about, I would say, about 2 feet. They were colored blue, and they had fins which looked like wings, and they would jump out of the water and skip along the water for a while, and then go right back in again. And we had albatrosses following us. They never moved their wings; they always glided with the winds. And we 35 days later. We arrived at Saipan, the island of Saipan, and we got off went down the cargo nets into the landing boats and landed on the beach, and there was fighting going on, and our battleships were sending these big shells over our heads, which sounded like express trains going off in the distance, you know.
Oh, okay.
And
would you say that was your baptism by fire?
the what?
Would you consider that?
Yeah. We got on trucks to take us toward the front lines, and on the way, we were really startled. They didn't have time to bury the Japanese soldiers. They only buried the American soldiers, and there were a lot of bodies laying on the ground, or some of them half buried with their arms or legs sticking out of the ground, or a head missing from the body. It rolled off with the helmet. And the place smelled horribly with dead humans and animals. The place must have been a tropical paradise at one time, but what it looked like was all the treetops were shorn by the shells, and the dust and dirt kicked up by the exploding shells on the ground, you know. And it was a mess.
Your purpose was to capture the airfield, which was closer to Japan than we ever were?
This was the intent of the whole operation for Saipan, was to get this airfield expanded so that B-29s could take off from it and bomb Japan, which it did. They used to mine the coral on the sides of the hills, and the CBs used to do this, naval construction battalions, and Army engineers also, and Marine Corps. I guess they all participated. They would lay down this pink coral, which turned glistening white with the sun when it got bleached, but it made a hard enough surface that it made good roads and also runway for the aircraft. And they had a lot of problems. The enemy was determined that the airfield should be completed, and at one night they dropped a bomb on a fuel dump that they were building up over there, and it went up in a ball of flame, and about a few seconds later, the whole ground shook when that happened. But they did manage to finish it, and what we did was we first backed up the front line, the infantry. We didn't see them. We were back far enough, and we also had to do a lot of patrols for enemy snipers and stragglers. I never saw one. Mm-hmm. Luckily, maybe. I don't know. In fact, after I told some people about this, they said, "You're just plain lucky because your first shot could have been your last." But anyway, we used to do patrolling, and then we tried to set up repair facilities for them, and that's when I found out that, well, I started for about a couple of weeks. I don't remember really too much of what happened in that. All I know is we moved around a lot, never got a chance to wash or change our clothes for about 2 weeks, and it wasn't until I was assigned as to guard a truck going to the beach to pick up supplies from a landing boat and bring it back that I found a well there, and I was able to wash up. And we went back, and after the 2 weeks, we had a chance to start setting up a supply depot. Well, they brought in a van for repairing the radios, and I started doing the radios, and then the next thing I know, they're telling me we need 24 volts DC supply so that we can test these radios, and nobody knew anything about batteries or where. So I searched around, and I found a generator, a gasoline engine generator, and then a control panel, about portable. Everything was portable, and then located some storage batteries, and one of them was 24 volts, so I charged it up, and I kept it charged up for the van so they could test the radios. I tried testing some of the radios, but they were so corroded that they were beyond repair.
What happened to them?
They didn't moisture and fungus proof them at the time, and it was then that they learned that at the factory what they had to do was dry them out after they assembled them, the panel boards, the electronics, and then spray them with moisture and fungus proofing varnish. They sent us a kit out there to try to do that in the field, but it was too late. You know, the equipment was already damaged. So anyway, instead of repairing radios or radars, I never saw a radar after I left the States, and it was decided that it was more important that I had storage batteries charged up, because radio jeeps start coming in needing batteries. Amtrak came in and needed a 24-volt battery, and that became my job, mainly to make sure that there were charged batteries available for whoever came in and needed them. The vehicle couldn't move without a battery that was working, you know.
So you were transported by trucks? You got there at D+5?
Yeah, it was 5 days after the initial landing, although some elements of the 7th Field Depot landed on D-Day there, or right after it. And in fact, in Okinawa, you'll see that we did land on D-Day.
Your depot was chosen to store and issue supplies, distribute ammo, and salvage and repair equipment on Saipan, and assisted in re-equipping by accepting, repairing, reissuing items turned in before leaving Saipan. You didn't do any of that?
And the what?
Did you help with any of that with the supply service?
Yes, we were basically a repair and supply facility, and we supplied mainly dry batteries for the portable radios, that backpack radios, and wet batteries for the Jeeps that use radio communications on them. Also, some vehicles like an Amtrak would come in and need a large 24-volt battery to be.
Right.
So that's how I got into the battery business and stayed in it during the whole war.
And you said twice that you boarded landing boats and made beach landings on different parts of the island?
Well, the 2 weeks that is a blur to me, we moved around just to back up the troops that were fighting, and we made 2 separate landings where action required that they needed backup and keep the area behind them clear of any stragglers or snipers, you know.
And did you say that you slept on the ground without tents?
Yeah, we just laid a poncho on the ground and went to sleep, put a gas mask for a pillow, and that was it. And later on, when we were in a settled area, we used to dig a square hole about a foot deep, put a little hill of dirt around the top so that the rainwater wouldn't wash in. We learned that from experience.
Yeah.
And then we had 2-man tent. In other words, each of us had a half a tent, and we put it together, and 2 of us would sleep in that thing.
And you lived on 3 cans of sea rations a day?
That was the worst part about being there.
No hot
food? The food.
Yeah.
See, it was, the sea rations were designed to be used only for about 2 or 3 week period, you know. But they figured, well, conditions were such that they couldn't get fresh food out to us. We weren't where it was available. And
because the Japanese were retreating more into the center of the island.
They were going toward one end and then another end, and the opposite ends, yes. They were being pushed. They never did find all of them. Even after the war, I think that some of them came out of the bushes.
That's true. Yeah, there was a movie about that not that long ago. And so you were assigned to ride guard on a truck.
Yeah, that was the time that I finally got a chance to wash up when
Right, you said
I
that.
was assigned that. And
But with your riding guard with the rifle?
I had to keep ride what they call ride shotgun, you know, make sure that they're protected, you know.
Even though you never did shoot your gun?
No,
Right.
didn't have to.
That's good. And it sounds like what traumatized you was the smell.
Yeah, you never got over it. You know, every time I smelled something that was decaying, it reminded me of
Flashback.
Yeah.
For
Saipan. Yeah.
later in life,
Yeah,
you
even
mean?
later in life.
Okay.
Yeah. Caught dengue fever. Oh man,
What?
mosquitoes. One thing about this place is the flies and mosquitoes took their turns. All day long, you would have flies because they were feeding on the bodies, and
Right.
it was really disgusting because we had to put a mosquito netting over our can when we were eating it so that the flies wouldn't get at it. Then about 5-minute intermission at night at dusk, and then the mosquitoes came, and they carried dengue fever. Almost everybody got dengue fever, and it was a very debilitating sickness in that I was in a hospital tent for about a week, and when I wake up in the morning, I couldn't move a muscle. Then I started with my fingers and my toes, and then my ankles and legs, and finally I was able to move after about an hour, you know. It was pretty bad. I was pretty sick, but after a week,
What did they give you?
I guess they gave me some kind of medication. We were in a very rudimentary tent, you know. It wasn't a hospital, and we had corpsmen. These are Navy corpsmen assigned to our outfit, and they treated us with whatever it was. But then after that,
You were exposed to DDT?
yeah. After
That's not good.
things settled a bit, the planes started spraying DDT to get rid of the flies and the mosquitoes, and sometimes you had to sneeze because some of it would land on you.
That's not Agent Orange, is it?
No.
Oh, okay. So how did you keep the batteries dry? You had to store them?
They were stored in sealed, the dry batteries, you mean?
Right.
Yeah, they were sealed in wax paper, I guess. They didn't have plastic then.
What's the difference between dry batteries and wet storage batteries?
Dry battery you can use,
I never heard of that.
well, you know what, a flashlight battery? You can just put it in a flashlight and turn it on. The wet cell batteries had to be charged, and if the vehicle doesn't have a charger working on it, or has a charger, every vehicle has a car has a generator, and it generates a voltage which keeps your battery charged. But if you didn't do that, it would discharge, and you would have to charge it. And to do that, you would have to apply voltage to the terminals, and a little bit above the voltage of the battery, like if it's a 6 volt, it would have to be 6.1 volts so that a current would go into there, keep it charged.
So it was summer in Saipan when you were there. Must have been
Very
really
pleasant climate.
Oh, good.
And
Okay.
yeah, it had a sea breeze all the time because it was an island.
It wasn't on the equator, right? So it wasn't as
No, it wasn't
horrible.
that far down. No.
That's good. What else? Backpack radios. Yet they were used in the Pacific as well?
Oh, yeah. They're used all over because they didn't have the walkie-talkies yet. Maybe they came later. But at that time, it was mostly backpack radios that were used. They were pretty heavy compared to the radios they have today.
Your trousers used to get shredded from battery acid.
Yeah, well, it was one comedian we had in our outfit looked at my trousers and said, "Here he comes, Acid Dan, the battery man." He always used to call me that. He was a very nice guy. I liked him. Actually, I liked everybody. The 100 of us that we were together, we all got to know each other well and got along real good.
A sniper shot a man in another company while he was unloading ammo.
Yeah, you know, it's the first time they used Negro black troops to unload ammunition, and this one guy was on the truck, I guess, unloading, and a sniper shot him. So the next morning, this is the first time I went on patrol, and we formed a line and start searching completely the area, looking for a place where he might have been hiding, you know, and we couldn't find him. It was very difficult to find these people. They knew the terrain more than we did. There were a lot of caves or places, niches for them to hide in, and which we didn't know about.
And not just the enemy were in the caves, the natives, the
Yes,
civilians.
there were. What happened?
Families.
It's happened later on. I was on patrol, and there was a bunch of fellas on the rim of what used to be a volcano, a crater, and I and two others went down into the rim because there was a rumor that there might be soldiers in a cave there, but I went searching all the way around the bottom, and I couldn't find any opening. I guess they put some rocks in front of it to hide it, so we went back up, and then later on, another patrol evidently saw them, and they went into the cave, and they asked them to come out, and finally there were a couple of women that came out. I don't know how many, but there were a couple of soldiers inside the cave.
Oh, okay.
And rather than come out, they blew themselves up with a hand grenade, I guess. And, but the women came out. In fact, we used to see the women in compounds as we used to go by. There were Japanese women. There was also a native tribes that lived on the island, and in fact, they used to, at one time, when everything was settled, they used to put on a dance that was native to them. I don't forget what they were called, but evidently what happened was Japan came over and took over the island, and they brought their own people and pushed these people back, and
It happens everywhere, right?
yeah.
And what about what was happening in the air? Did you have air support?
Lots of fighting going on in the air. In the daytime, we would see our own planes, fighter planes, fighting with the enemy. Kamikazes used to
The Zero?
crash on ships and stuff like that. It was a lot, and
You
then at
saw-
night, it was lit up like a 4th of July with the anti-aircraft carrier. We didn't need television. We had a lot of entertainment in that area. And later on, I'll tell you in Okinawa what happened. But
So the planes were B-29s? The big ones?
no, the B-29s came in when the area was pretty much settled. And I think the island was secured around July.
B-29s must have been too big for carriers.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now I understand.
They were
Okay.
flown in from the United States. And they would come in, and then we started seeing them every morning. They would take off to bomb Japan. And this was after the action was pretty quiet, you know. It was under control. And although the bombers, the enemy bombers always kept trying to get to the field, but they set up what they call radar picket boats around the island. They would equip with radar so that they got warning when they were coming in. And of course, with the airfield, we had our fighter planes there, and also the aircraft carriers that were off the shore had planes. The Navy got hit pretty hard in both Saipan and Okinawa. They were vulnerable out in the ocean, and they were targets for the
Kamikazes.
and other planes, bombers. There was a lot of action at night and day and night. We had air raids all the time.
So while you were still on Saipan, the B-29s were taking off from there to bomb Japan every day?
Because after the fighting ended around July, I think, in Saipan.
Early July?
Yeah, and the planes were taking off on a regular basis, bombing Japan. I imagine they not only took off during the day, but also at night.
So before the infantry landed on Saipan, 8,000 Marines went in first. We should say that invasions of islands were amphibious landings by the Marines.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about that.
Amphibious, well, I think it was the 5th Amphibious Corps that was in charge of the island of Saipan. The Army was used as a supplement, to add more manpower, but being that it was an amphibious operation, we were part of the 5th Fleet, I think it was, and they set up an amphibious corps for the purpose of taking in an objective, you know.
Right.
In this case, I think it was Guam and Saipan and some Peleliu, some islands wherever they wanted to take it, around that area, Marianas.
And in Saipan on July 7, The largest bonsai charge of the Pacific Theater, 3,000 Japanese civilians
Was this
jumped
on
off the
Saipan?
cliff? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We didn't see that. We
And that
heard
was
about
from
it.
an order from the Imperial,
What happened was they indoctrinated the Japanese to think that we were going to treat them badly because they treated us, if they took any prisoners, of course, you know, they treated them pretty badly.
yes, of course.
And they told them, oh, you're going to really get treated badly. And we tried with interpreters to talk them
Right.
out of doing it, but some of them did.
That's
Some
good.
of them did. And even some of the soldiers, very few soldiers gave up, you know. But there was maybe a scattering that did. And then we found out that they weren't treated badly, and then we sent these people to the caves where they might have been hiding and talk them out of talk them into coming out and giving up. But some of them didn't believe us, and from what I seen on TV afterwards is they jumped off this cliff over there.
That wasn't by where you were?
No.
Okay. The emperor issued an order and said that if they did that, if they took their own lives, that they would be, in the afterlife, they would be considered just like a soldier
This is
would.
what I understand.
Right. And Hirohito.
Actually, it's the soldier himself, if he dies in combat, I think they feel that he would be exalted in the afterlife.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the civilians, no.
Right.
I think the civilians were just afraid, the ones that jumped off.
Well, another thing is that they weren't really allowed to know the truth of the war. The newspapers.
That's true. I
Yeah.
understand in Japan, the history books don't have anything about World War II.
Oh, okay.
But then neither do our books either.
Oh.
I mean, you could ask a kid today who fought in the Civil War, and they'll say, well, the United States and Germany.
Uh-oh. All right, so by July, Saipan and Tinian, which was
And
next
then
to
we
it.
hung around until it was time for the next operation. We turned the depot over to Iwo Jima was happening in that, but they had another field depot they set up, an 8 field depot that helped out at Iwo Jima. And then after they finished with Iwo Jima, the 8 field depot was sent over to Saipan to take over our depot facilities so that we could go on to the next operation.
Who got the presidential unit citation? The 7th Field Depot?
7th Field Depot.
Okay.
They were one of many, if you read the citation, many different outfits were named as participating in the Battle of Saipan, and the 7th Field Depot was one of them. And it got so that I could wear this yellow ribbon
Yellow bar.
to show that we got it.
Congratulations. That's awesome. Do you feel proud for what you did?
I don't feel I did that much to deserve it, but
Yes, you
I was
did.
included.
Everybody was a part of the effort.
Yeah, it was a team effort.
And did you feel it was a well-organized effort? Your supplies got to you okay? And
Yeah. We
That's good.
received it. We had a clear ground afterwards to make room for it. But it came through. The supplies came through. It worked. Whatever it is that he wanted to do with the depot, it worked.
So fill in the blanks from July of 44 to February of 45. I don't know what you did in between those campaigns.
We essentially just maintained any equipment that had to be maintained.
Where?
We really didn't do too much after that. After the war,
But no, I mean,
fighting stopped.
no, I mean between 44 and February of 45. Were you back in Hawaii?
No, we stayed in Saipan. We were there for, I think, 9 months, 10 months.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, we were there for a long, that's the longest we've been in any one place.
What were living conditions like there for you?
The food never was great.
But were you still living in a hole?
Yeah, well, no, afterwards, the CBs set up tents, and tent city, and we did live in tents, but the food wasn't much better. They tried with what they could get, and every once in a while we get something warm, is good, but most of the time they used to get the sea rations and throw it in a pot and serve that. That was the hardest part of living on the island with the food. We all lost about 10 pounds on the average. We were all about 10 pounds underweight. But when we got on a ship, then we would get great meals, three a day, and our bodies got back to normal. And that's what happened. And I guess, let's see, we landed in Okinawa on the 1st of April. It was Easter Sunday. So it was a month, 35 days before that, we got on a boat. And it was what they call an APA, which was a combination cargo and troop transport. They only carried 700 troops, so they were able to feed us 3 meals a day and excellent food, the best. And for 35 days, and we had a chance to get back our weight and everything, and then we headed toward Okinawa. 35 days it took.
Your ship separated from the convoy to head in?
Yeah, we were separated the night before D-Day to go into Okinawa, and our boat separated from the rest, and the captain got on the horn of the boat. Said we were just missed by 5 torpedoes. If anybody sees a torpedo wake, report it to the bridge immediately, but no more torpedoes were fired. I guess the guy shot all his load. And nothing happened till the next morning. We found ourselves off the coast of Okinawa. And as it was customary, whenever a landing was made, if the main body of troops was going to land on one side, they made a fake landing on the other to try to draw attention from where they were landing. And this happened off Okinawa. The main assault troops when they were landing on the western side of the island, we were anchored around the southeastern part, and they asked if we want to go on board these landing boats and make a fake landing. And we were bored, and I felt, yeah, let's go. so we jumped into these boats, and the airplanes were laying a smoke screen on the beach there, and the battleships were sending their air express shells over our heads, and we went we're scared as hell. We went about 3/4 way in, as if we were going to land, and then turned around and went back out.
Wow.
And then...
What kind of craft were you on?
A landing boat, Higgins boat, they call it.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So Marines were landing on both sides?
No, only on one side. The other side was a diversion.
But there were Marines on either side, right?
And then when we went back to the boat, we got transferred to an aircraft carrier, which took us to the main landing beach on the western side. And D+1, we landed. The landing was unopposed. What the Japs had a new idea is to let us in, but let us go into prepared positions, which were zeroed in with mortars and artillery, and
Barbed wire?
No open area, because they wanted to make it a killing field, and it worked. We lost a lot of men, infantry, in those spots. But they thought that the main fighting would be in the north part of the island, so they sent us, the signal company, to that part to support the 6th Division heading north, whereas the 1st Division went east into they cut across the island, divided in two. But the Army was sent to the southern part, but unfortunately they got into where the worst part was going. So as soon as the Marines got through on the north and the central part, they went down and took over a lot of the fighting that went on in the southern part. But while the 6th Division was in the north, I broke off from the main depot company. About a dozen of us separated from the company and went with the 6th Division to back them up and supply and service them while they were operating. But I think it only took about 18 or 19 days before they finished mopping up in the north, and then we went back down to the central part of the island where we were supplying both divisions, you know.
Were enemy radios able to hear American radio traffic?
I'm sure. When we were on Okinawa, there was a lot of air activity. I mean, it was very intense. That's when they introduced the kamikazes, I think. And because they were getting desperate, because they knew Okinawa was closer to Japan than Saipan was, and it was, and the B-29s could go round the clock easily from that distance. So they tried to defend it very heavily, and they did. I saw kamikazes crashing into our planes. One time I was on a radio watch for air raid. Every once in a while you had to take turns, you know, and you listen to the chatter going on the radio between pilots and the picket boats and the artillery. They were all on the same channel, so the Japs, I'm sure, heard all of that too. And sometimes it would be reported that a picket boat was crashed by a kamikaze, and I had to give the azimuth, and I go and look in that direction, and I would see the boat in flames, and then its own ammunition would tear it apart and blow it up, and it would sink. You know? I've seen our fighter planes peel off, and these tracers are going into the bomber, one right after the other would peel off, and while we're eating, you know, we would see this stuff going on. It was going on all the time. And I wrote a letter home the first time they allowed us to tell us what was happening, and I can't find that letter.
Oh.
Can't find it. And it was a very vivid description of, which I don't remember now, you know. It was a very vivid description of what was going on at that time, you know, because I wrote it as I was watching it.
Right. And your mom saved it? Your mother saved it?
Yeah, my sister saved it.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you're giving some good description here today. Oh. I wanted to also say that it was the largest amphibious invasion of the Pacific Campaign, and the last major campaign.
We were supposed to invade Japan, and from what I see now on the news, they show what would happen if we landed in Japan. Like, they would have a program saying that, and they said that there were a lot more troops waiting for us there in Japan than they thought, because they brought them in from China. And they said they had some fairly sophisticated flying machines, jets, to suicide things, to crash into our boats and stuff like that. It would have been a pretty rough, a lot rougher deal than any of the two operations I was in, I think, if we had to land there. We were scheduled, from what I seen later, to land on the southern island of Japan. The third amphibious was scheduled for that. But then they dropped a bomb and the war ended, and we didn't celebrate, you know. I mean, I went around and says, congratulations for surviving a war, you know.
Right.
But we didn't have any beer or anything like that, like they'd had in the States. We missed all that.
How was morale for you guys?
It was okay. For us, it was pretty good because we weren't involved in the frontline fighting. I imagine the morale for them was pretty bad. Being that we were technicians and they considered us too highly trained to be used as infantrymen, you know.
Oh, okay.
So that's why we never got involved in direct fighting.
Do you know anything about, there were 2,000 Black Marines on Okinawa?
Yeah, that was the first time I think that they used them in a group to unload. They were ammunition handlers. That was part of the 7th Field Depot. They were incorporated. You know, they kept taking units as they needed to make up. It was very flexible. They had a very flexible organization going. And yes, there were Black Marines that were used for the first time in an operation.
And Okinawa had drenching rain and bottomless mud hampered the work of the ammo and depot companies as the troops advanced and supply lines grew longer. They moved ammo and other cargo forward to sustain the fighting, as well as brought back the wounded.
Well, I didn't see too much rain at the time we were there. It might have happened afterwards, but the weather was a little cooler than Saipan, but not that bad. It was still summer, you know, there. Okinawa, in fact, they say is a place where longevity in life is the longest. In other words, the people live long there because of the climate and everything. They took a survey later on, you know. And of course, all this stuff that I'm telling you, when we were there, we didn't have a clue as to what was going on. We were just there, told to do this, to do that, but we didn't know the big picture. Nobody did, I don't think. It wasn't until afterwards that I read the history of the 7th Field Depot that jogged my memory as to, oh yes, I was there, or yes, we were doing this, you know. And that's why I can give you the details, because the history tells you what the unit was doing, and it jogged my memory as to what we were doing as part of that unit, you know.
That's perfect. And you had dogs there? Enemies, they sniffed the enemy, the dogs? They could smell the enemy?
No.
No?
What I was thinking afterwards is there's three things that I think fell on a search and destroy, a search mission, a patrol, or infantry should have.
Oh, I see.
That should be a telescope, a small telescope or binoculars. He needs more vision and more sound. And what was the other thing? A dog.
Right.
They could use a sniffing dog, because if I had a dog with me when I was down in that crater looking for the cave,
Right.
I would have found them.
Oh, I see.
Dogs are very valuable in the field.
And you got your squad member to not throw a grenade because it would have rolled down.
Yeah, the cave was above us. And I says, okay, you want to throw a grenade up there. What happens if you miss that hole up there and it comes rolling down your feet? What are you going to do? So that changes his
And he
mind.
realized he's not such a good throw.
You never throw a grenade when it might come back to you.
So your detachment was located in the middle of the island.
Yeah, it was set there so that we could reinforce, service both divisions at the same time.
So I would think that the middle of the island would have some stragglers there, no? Some enemy stragglers?
No, not in the, where we went back to. They were mainly in the north where we were supporting the 6th Division. And then in the south, there were so many troops fighting that there was no place for a straggler to hide, really.
Oh. And you tried ordering meters to replace those that broke, and the new ones came in broken as well?
I used to have to keep rebuilding that panel, control panel, because moving it around as much as we did practically destroyed it. And I tried to get meters that were broken, and they came in, but they were broken too. And I had to use a handheld meter to check the voltages and currents.
And you had to work on Japanese electronics?
The captain of our company commander, came in with this chassis, electronic chassis, and he says, make me a schematic of this so that we can see what it was. And I made a drawing of all the parts, radio. Turned out to be a radio transmitter that the Japanese were using. But that's the only time I did anything more with electronics.
So the ships that were mostly getting targeted by the kamikazes were the radar-equipped picket ships?
Yeah, they were the prime targets because they were giving warning when they came in, and they were equipped with radars, and they surrounded the island to provide the air radar support that was needed for warning. They were the air warning system. And it was coordinated with, the land base. The kamikazes would target them first to try to knock them out so that they could come in undetected. But then later on, the Navy had another idea for nighttime. Daytime, you could see the planes. At nighttime, you couldn't. So they couldn't, before they couldn't send up a fighter plane after the bombers at night because you couldn't find them. But what they did was they trained a radar on the enemy plane, and then they would tell our plane where to go to get near it. And and they call that night fighter planes. And when they got near enough, they could see where the plane was, maybe from the exhaust flames, stuff like that. And they were able to shoot them down that way because the anti-aircraft was not very effective. They don't have the sophisticated anti-aircraft capability that they had today. It was mostly send up a bunch of shells and hope one of them would hit. And it didn't work too well because I very rarely saw any plane shot down with an anti-aircraft. I saw a lot of shells going up.
Oh, okay. And no night vision goggles. That might have helped.
No, no, that's only good on the ground, not for the air.
Oh, I see.
Although they might be all right for the pilots now. Maybe they do have it. But
one time our own anti-aircraft guns fired on a night fighter aircraft by mistake.
Yeah.
And the language coming from the pilot?
I think the language was enough to deflect the bullets that was flying at him.
Enemy activity ended on Okinawa around July 2nd, 45.
Yeah. And we were getting ready to invade Japan. But then they dropped a bomb. The war ended. We looked at each other. what's going to happen next, you know. What happened next is they sent us to, we got on a boat. Oh, a typhoon hit Okinawa right after we left it.
Oh, my goodness.
And we were still caught in some of the rough waves that it made when we were on a transport. We had to take these Atabrine tablets, which were yellow. You saw a lot of yellow stuff going over the side.
Yikes.
From seasickness. I used to get seasick the first 3 days out on the ship. The only time I never got seasick on the ship was going from Saipan to Okinawa. The ocean was like glass.
Wow.
But going from Okinawa to China, it took me a little bit to get used to it, but I got used to it. I was a poor candidate to ship-to-shore operations.
What do you mean?
Well, I get seasick, you know. And when you're in a landing boat, you're getting so sick that you don't care what's on the beach, you want to get off the boat. But anyway, we got on this boat got to the Yellow Sea, and the Yellow Sea was yellow from the dirt that was being washed in from the Yellow River. So it was yellow, that's why they got that name. And we got on went down the sides to the landing boats again and went to up the Yellow River to where there was a train terminal. And we got on that train and we didn't know what to expect. You know, we were going into China and we wound up in the city of Tianjin, which is it's now the capital, I think. It's called Beijing now. And the train took us there, and then we marched in, and the crowds were greeting us nice, very well, you know, very friendly. And
What did you think you were doing there? Did you think that you would have been going in the other direction, going home after the war?
We didn't know. We didn't have
You weren't told
any clue.
why
Yeah,
you were going to China?
We thought maybe we would go to Japan, you know, as an army occupation troop, but
You didn't really ask what's going on, you just went along with everything?
yeah, well, nobody knew. Even the captain didn't know, because the only time he knew what was going on is when we got on a boat and he opened up sealed orders.
Okay.
That's how we knew we were going to Saipan. That's how we knew we were going to go to Okinawa. We get on a boat, he would open up this sealed envelope and then read to us where we were going. And he found out for the first time himself.
But it didn't say what you were going to be doing there or why you were going there? What the mission was, or?
Well, we knew that we were going to be repair and supply.
Oh.
We knew what our mission was going to be.
Oh, there were Marines there, so you were going there to
Yeah.
help the Marines. Okay.
And, well, Tianjin was just, we thought we were going to be supplying the nationalist troops and working with them, fighting the communists. And there was fighting going on between the nationalists and the communists outside the city. You can sometimes hear the explosions and stuff like that.
So now it's like another war.
Yeah,
right?
and we were wondering, what are we doing here? You know?
Wow.
Our war ended, you know. What are we doing fighting their war now? So that was, I guess you could call that the introduction to the Cold War, you know.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
But actually, I set up, we were in what they call a compound, which is a series of buildings in a circle with an opening in the middle. You know, a compound.
Like a courtyard?
Yeah, a courtyard was in the middle, and I was given a room to set up the battery charger and batteries, and then near the end, before I left, I even hired a Chinese guy to run it after I showed him how to do it, you know. And we were just there for about 4 months. We had 1 day on, 1 day off. It was excellent duty. I mean, food was excellent, and sights and the women were excellent. So everything was good, you know. it was really a relief from the almost 2 years we were out on the islands, you know. It was a lot better living.
It was like decompressing, right?
Yeah. And we enjoyed it. We enjoyed it. It was good.
And your attitude was, let them fight each other. We fought our war. It's time to go home.
Well, what happened was, before a replacement started coming in for us, so our time was, they had to let us out by 6 months after the war ended, because we went through the draft, and anybody who went through the draft had to be released. We were in the reserves, not regular. So that meant that they had to release us 6 months after the war ended. So it was getting close to that time, and they sent in the other troops, and the captain gets in front of everybody and tries to recruit us to sign over and become regular Marines, and we were all thinking, heck, there's no war going on, what do we need to sign up for? So nobody did it. And,
Right.
Then after January, I guess it was, we had a chance, by the way, while we were there, to see the Wall of China, but it would involve a trip in the wintertime in an open truck, 90 miles, so nobody took them up on it. But anyway, we got on an aircraft carrier this time to head back to the United States, and we took about a week, I think, and that Pacific is pretty wide. And we landed again in San Diego, where we left in the first place. And
It must have been different not being in a convoy and you could go faster, right?
yeah,
Like 3 times as fast.
a week.
Right.
Maybe a week and a half, I don't know. Anyway, we got back to San Diego and coming off the ship, and everybody's wondering, where the heck are you people coming from? It was 6 months after the war was over.
You missed all the hoopla.
Yeah.
Well,
And they're wondering, oh, gee, what rock did they crawl out from under, you know? But anyway, we came back, spent a week there, and then we got on a train. I got on what was called the Atchison, Topeka, and the Santa Fe, and it reminded me of the Judy Garland song at the time, you know. I always think of that. And there was another troop train next to us. The one I was on was going for the northern guys living up north, and the other one was
Yankees.
for the ones the rebels living south. So first thing you hear, a remark from one train going to the other. I don't know which one started it. Then a responding remark would go back to the other train. Next thing you know, the north and south is verbally fighting the Civil War again. But then we ended friendly. We declared a truce, and I wound up in Bainbridge, where I was discharged in
Maryland.
Maryland, and went up to Newark, New Jersey, and home. And that's the end of that.
What did you mean that you said that you believe you're a candidate for the records?
Yeah. Who can claim that they've been on dozens of search missions, patrols, looking for snipers and stragglers, participated in maybe a half a dozen landings,
Oh, I see.
and still not fire a shot?
Probably not many, yeah.
The only time I fired the weapon was some poor goat got its leg almost shot off, and I had to put it out of its misery.
Oh,
That's the only time I killed anything with it.
wow. And you said that during the time you were overseas, none of you had a clue of what was happening. Well, you already said that. It wasn't until you read articles that jogged your memory for the dates.
Right, because we didn't have a clue as to what was going on the whole time we were there, because it wasn't recorded, you know. Everything wasn't put together like when we came back and I saw Victory at Sea, and I started to see what we were involved in, and then I started seeing different documentaries about the war, which then indicated, oh yeah, well that's what was happening, you know, I would say.
And you had said when you got here that you wished you had brought your uniform, and you wrote here that the shoulder patch on your uniform shows a golden Chinese dragon on a red background.
Unfortunately, I didn't bring it with me. It's,
And the dragon is for Marine Force China.
they renamed the 3rd Amphibious Corps Marine Force China because we were in China. And they used the dragon because we were in China, the Chinese dragon. And they put the Roman numeral 3 for the 3rd Amphibious Corps, and the red background is the Marine Corps color, red. Then after the war, I don't know if you want to know what happened afterwards.
Yes, please.
Well, I followed up my electronic training by going to engineering school, which was not easy.
Where'd you go?
First, I went to upstate New York, a junior college, and because everybody was going back to school, and
On the GI Bill?
yeah, and I then transferred to New Jersey Institute of Technology, and I
Oh, right in Newark.
I graduated from there as an electrical engineer. Then I went to work in Fort Monmouth, the electronic research and development lab there, and there I learned electronics on the job because the school didn't know anything about electronics at that time. It was too new. All the professors knew was basic power generating stuff. So I picked up, it took me about a year really to get on board with the electronics. I had to learn how to use electronic equipment. Then I worked on the first job I had was to solve all the problems of a transmitter that they dropped out of an airplane and gave weather information as it parachuted down to an airplane flying away. The Air Force needed this because Cold War was on, and they wanted to know the weather pattern of parts of the world where they couldn't launch balloons, so they would use this. And it had a lot of problems, which took me a couple of years to finally straighten out. And we tested it in a B-29 flying at 30,000 feet and up and down the coast of New Jersey from Asbury Park to Atlantic City and back. We used to go and drop these things down and test them, and they parachute down, and they use them also to drop them in the middle of hurricanes in order to get the plane would fly in the middle of a hurricane in the quiet spot and drop one of these things there to get pressure, temperature, and humidity.
In the eye of a hurricane?
Yeah. Anyway, we finally did that, and they used, I think, 80,000 the first year, the Air Force, because they used them all over the world to track the weather patterns. Then after that, I worked on all transistor tape recorder. This was before you could buy a transistor tape. I had to design the circuits for that and for the satellite, one of the satellites, Vanguard. And then after that, the company developed a meteorological rocket which went up about 200,000 feet, which was 100,000 feet higher than the balloons would go. So they wanted me to redesign this balloon radio sound they used to send up by balloon to fit into this nose cone, which I did. And then the Navy asked for the ground tracking equipment I reconfigured so that it could track a rocket up. They used what they call a Raywin set. And then Navy wanted to make a ballistic shot up and down without a parachute, and they wanted to put a booster on this rocket so it would go up to 500,000 feet. And they asked me to design the tracking system for that, which I did. I used a tape recorder, 7-tack tape recorder, because everything happened in 5 minutes and had to be recorded and then sifted out afterwards, played at a slow tape, play the tape back at a slower speed so that you can see what the data was reading, and that worked okay. Then I worked in avionics lab. After 15 years with the meteorological division, I worked in the avionics lab and working on the air traffic management system using computer-generated models. First time we were using computers to generate systems, you know. Cornell lab came up with a program and then they handed it to me and said, here, run with it. So I did. And meanwhile, the Vietnam War was going on and they were having trouble with this radio beacon that helicopters home in on. It would go into spurious operation and cause the radios all around it to jam, which is the last thing you wanted to do. And a couple of guys went out there, and the most they could come back with was that it had something to do with the high temperatures that it was experienced out there. So
You said 115 degrees?
115 degrees and humid on a delta area. If you went up in the highlands, which I did also, it was cooler. It was 1,200 feet higher.
And you did that as a lieutenant colonel, you said?
Yeah, what happened was they asked the engineering department if they can send people out there every once in a while to help out with the technical problems there. And
What year was that?
1966, I think. It was 6 months before that I went out, before the Tet Offensive.
Oh, so then it was 67.
Yeah. Is that when the Tet Offensive was?
Yeah, that was January 68.
Yeah, then I was there in 66. I was there from May to July. And they gave me a rank of lieutenant colonel because if I got wounded, I could be treated in an Army hospital. See, I had to be in the Army. I could use also the mess facilities, officers' mess. And being I was a JS-13, the equivalent rank in the military was lieutenant colonel. So that's what they made me. And for 7 weeks, I was a lieutenant colonel.
How did you feel going to Vietnam? I mean, by then there's TV.
Well, I was used to a war. Don't forget, I've been out in the Pacific in the war zone for almost 2 years, so going to Vietnam wasn't too much different for me.
Was it kind of like being in Hawaii as far as the climate?
Well, no, not as nice. It was too hot.
Oh, it's much hotter.
But anyway, we traveled around by helicopter because it was too dangerous to go by vehicle. I think on 3 occasions, every once in a while, a guy would shoot up at a helicopter, and that happened about 3 times while I was flying around. But anyway, I went out there and borrowed a heat gun from the Air Force, and they sent the contractor out too. And we went into an air-conditioned tent, and I laid the equipment out. And I tried the heat gun on one plot first to try to get it to do what it was supposed to. Then, when we did it on the frequency divider circuit, it found out there were some bad transistors out of spec in there causing it. And luckily, the contractor brought some spare things and
Transistors.
and it worked. And I went also to the Central Highlands, and I went down the line, the different outposts that they had there. I got a lot of pictures there of that. Mm-hmm. I found that they were using the equipment on a continuous basis when it was designed to be used only on an intermittent basis, you know.
What do you mean? The equipment? What equipment?
The radio beacon, the picture of it there.
You're only supposed to use the radio beacon on an intermittent basis?
Yes, in other words, it's supposed to be a portable unit. A portable unit, that's me checking out one of the units there.
Nice.
It's supposed to be a portable unit for helicopters to home in on this low frequency signal and find their way back. They tune in on the frequency, and that tells them which one they have to come back to. And this is a picture of it in the distance. Okay.
Who was on the helicopter with you that had
usually,
weapons?
There was a gunner
Right.
on each side, and of course the pilot and co-pilot. And we had to strap ourselves in because we usually operated with the door open, you know, and you look out about 1,200 feet high. And you can, that picture there shows an Army base there. I don't know if you can see it too good at the camera.
Yes.
And one of them, shows one at the top of we were in the Highlands. This is the Central Highlands where the 1st Cavalry was operating.
Mm-hmm.
And I checked some of their equipment and found that other parts were failing because they weren't designed to be operated on a continuous basis. So I made a note of that in my report, and so that they can redesign this thing so that it can be used on a continuous basis.
That's a shame.
Yeah. There was a little bit of lack of foresight in thinking that it would only be used on a short time basis, whereas they kept it on all the time.
Oh, I see now.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember being this guy?
That was me in boot camp.
Aw.
I was 18, no, I guess just turned 19, I guess. No, I was still 18, I think it was before my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
That was taken.
You looked very serious.
Yeah, it was serious business.
Here's your discharge form. Oh, your middle name is Americo.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
My wife says it's a miracle.
So we didn't talk about anything other than the GI Bill for education. Did you use it for buying a house? No. No?
No.
What about they had insurance or something? You could have got a good deal.
Unfortunately, I let it lapse, and I went to reinstate it, but I was 1 week too late. So
Oh, my
I didn't
goodness.
do that. So I missed out on that one.
And do you go to the VA for anything?
Yeah, I used to go to the VA, but they said my income was too high and my health benefits were more than adequate. I had Blue Cross and, well, afterwards, Medicare, when I was on Medicare, they said, no, they couldn't do too much for me because my income was too high and my health benefits were more than adequate, so I didn't take advantage of too much of the VA. I didn't use it.
And how has your health been since the service?
It's okay. Every once in a while, when I first got out, I think every year or so, I used to get a relapse of the dengue fever, but then after a couple of years, it stopped. I had, when I was 54, I had atrial fibrillation, which a lot of people get, and doctor told me I needed more exercise, so I ran the marathon later on.
Oh my
5 years,
goodness.
New York, 5 years in a row, a lot of fun.
Whoa.
And to keep my health going.
Good for you.
30 years later, I was shoveling snow and came back again. And, I was told to take it easy. And
That's very common.
So-
Shoveling snow can do it.
so, otherwise, I still ride a bike. I'm 90 years old. I still ride a bike. And
How far do you ride? Oh,
well, I
that
can
goes
do
back
up
to,
to 3 miles, each way.
does
6
it
miles.
remind you of delivering telegrams?
Yeah,
Oh, my goodness.
I used to, yeah,
Miles.
that I have to thank for going to boot camp so easily.
You said that,
It could have been
yeah.
tough, you know.
You would have looked even madder in that picture. Aw. Do you belong to any veterans groups?
I just when I went to, I live in Applewood, which is a senior thing, total care, a continuing care facility, so that if anything happens, they have facilities for the next step and then the final
Oh, good.
step, you know.
That's like Seabrook.
And while I was there, the local Marine Corps League guy read something about me that I was in the Marine Corps, and he came there fast and he recruited me to join the Marine Corps League in Freehold, and which I belong to now. But I go every once in a while to their meetings, but I don't participate too much.
Maybe you could bring one of my forums and get me some more veterans.
Oh, okay.
I'd really appreciate that.
All right.
Have you ever spoken about your time in service to school groups or anything like that?
No.
So today's the most that you've ever spoken
Yeah,
about
that's
it?
because by writing it down,
Yes.
I was able to recall.
Yes.
By piecing it together, I went online to see also what the 3rd Amphibious Corps did, and what the 5th Amphibious Corps did, and put it all together into one package,
Right.
which is what I did. And that's why I can tell you as much as I could about it. Because if you asked me right after the war what I did, I couldn't explain it.
That's
Not
right.
to this detail.
That's right.
Yeah.
How do you feel looking back on your time in service? How do you feel about what you did?
I think it was the best decision I ever made. I got the GI Bill, which I never would have been able to finish college otherwise, and it really got me going.
Your career, electronics?
My career, he even told me what I was good at.
I love that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very good.
They knew more than I did about me.
Well, that's funny.
You know, you go through a battery of tests when you go in,
Oh, okay.
and then that's how they decide what you should be doing. And evidently I was good at Morse code and I was good at designing, you know. I guess they figured I had it in me to be an engineer or something like that, I think.
And you did well, I guess.
And I believed them.
And when you went to NJIT, you did well there?
Oh, it was rough.
Oh, it was rough,
for me,
yeah.
very rough. Because I have a poor memory. I don't have a good memory. In fact, when I used to work, I used to keep a logbook, write down people I contacted for what and what date, and that was my memory, really. And of course, I couldn't compete with some of the guys who had excellent memories. They used to get all A's with hardly trying because they could read a book and memorize it at first reading. You can't compete with that, you know. I was good in the lab, which was helpful, but
That's good.
But I had to really study, and unfortunately at that time, the curriculum required 20 hours of credit a semester for an engineering course. Today, they only have to do 16 credit hours, so they have it easier today.
Oh.
It was very rough. I could have handled 16 easily.
So that was 4 years of 20 credits a semester?
Yeah, very hard. And
That's really rough, yeah.
it was a lot of information, technical information to absorb at once. You know. When I first went to the junior college, I mean, the books were stacked like this that I had to carry by. I said, how am I ever going to find time to do all of this? You know, and I didn't have any social life. I got married 2 years before I graduated. So, but college life, you know, one time I was asked a question. What do you remember fondly about college? I said, there's nothing fondly that I can remember. It was all hard work.
Right. But you got through it. You're a Marine.
I got through it,
yes.
and I found that I also did pretty well on the job too. I found the job after a while a lot easier. In fact, I used to train other new people coming in on how to design electronic circuits.
How did you end up at Fort Monmouth?
I was interviewed, the last year we were interviewed by about 5 or 6 companies, and I was offered a job with IBM or RCA, and I went down to Fort Monmouth to visit their facility, and a guy in the meteorological division interviewed me and then asked me, "Is you willing to come to work here?" And I liked the kind of work they did. I liked the benefits, I was a federal employee, the benefits are good. So I decided that that's what I wanted to do.
Sounds like you did very well for yourself.
And I enjoyed the whole 30 years that I worked there.
And where did you live at the time?
I lived first in Newark and then Linden.
Oh, you commuted from Linden?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we had a shore. My wife's parents had a house down the shore, which was a little closer, down Orley Beach. So we used to spend the summers there, and I used to commute from there.
Nice.
So it wasn't too bad. It would have been nice living closer, but then we're used to living in the city where it's more things happen,
Oh, okay.
More neighbors and everything like
More
that.
neighbors.
Yeah.
Arthur, I just want to say that I'm honored and humbled that you came here today.
I'm glad to get it off my chest.
And you spoke to me of your time in service, and thank you for your sacrifice and contributions that you made in service to your country. God bless you.
Thank you.
Good job. Okay. All right, here's the Presidential Unit Citation. For outstanding performance in combat during a seizure.
Still missing some stuff, I think. I don't know.